You are scrolling at 1 in the morning when a headline appears. Scientists detect consciousness after death. Another says researchers may have found evidence of the soul. The thumbnail contains a glowing human outline leaving a hospital bed, because apparently the soul observes a strict visual branding policy. So, did scientists finally prove that the soul exists? No. No experiment has demonstrated that a non-physical part of a person leaves the body, survives irreversible death, or continues into an afterlife. But that boring little word, no, hides a genuinely fascinating story. Scientists have recorded brain activity near death. Some cardiac arrest survivors report vivid memories from resuscitation. A few describe watching events from outside their bodies. And researchers are getting better at studying the strange border between consciousness and death. The mistake is treating all of those discoveries as if they answer the same question. They do not. Before anyone can prove a soul exists, we need to decide what soul means. It might mean consciousness. It might mean personality, memory, moral identity, or an invisible essence that survives the body. Those are very different claims. We already know consciousness exists in one basic sense. You are having an experience right now. Unless this video is playing unattended while you have gone to find snacks, in which case consciousness has temporarily relocated to the kitchen. What science does not know is exactly how physical activity in the brain produces subjective experience. We can connect particular brain networks with vision, memory, emotion, attention, and the sense of owning a body. But why any of that activity feels like something from the inside remains a difficult problem. That mystery leaves room for competing ideas. Perhaps consciousness is entirely produced by the brain. Perhaps the brain shapes or receives something more fundamental. Perhaps our current categories are simply inadequate. Not knowing the answer, however, is not evidence for whichever answer has the most dramatic thumbnail. The strongest modern claims usually involve cardiac arrest. When the heart stops pumping effectively, blood flow to the brain collapses. The person becomes unresponsive, and without intervention, brain cells begin to suffer damage. But cardiac arrest is not identical to irreversible biological death. Resuscitation can sometimes restart circulation. Chest compressions can also push a limited amount of blood through the brain while the heart is stopped. This matters because the person who later describes an experience survived. Whatever happened occurred during a medical crisis, during resuscitation, or while consciousness was returning. It was near death, not a confirmed report from beyond irreversible death. One major attempt to study this was the AWARE project, short for Awareness During Resuscitation. Its 2014 report covered 2,060 cardiac arrest events. Only 140 survivors were healthy enough for an initial interview, which immediately shows the brutal practical problem. The people researchers most need to interview often do not survive or cannot reliably communicate afterward. Some survivors reported memories or a sense of awareness. 9% of those who completed more detailed interviews had experiences classified as near-death experiences. 2 people described seeing or hearing events connected with their resuscitation. One account contained details that researchers considered verifiable and consistent with the timing of the medical response. That is interesting. It is not proof that a soul left the body. The study did not establish that the information was acquired without functioning senses or brain activity, and no hidden visual target was identified. A later study called AWARE-2 tried to collect even more information during resuscitation. Researchers used brain monitoring, headphones, and visual targets that could test whether a patient later remembered something presented during CPR. Among 567 in-hospital cardiac arrests, 53 people survived and 28 completed interviews. 11 reported memories or perceptions suggesting some form of consciousness. Nobody identified the visual image. One person identified the auditory stimulus. Researchers also recorded organized EEG patterns in some patients during prolonged CPR, sometimes tens of minutes after cardiac arrest began. If you enjoy calm explanations of subjects that normally arrive wrapped in glowing arrows and existential panic, you can subscribe. We investigate the weird human part without pretending every mystery has already been solved. The EEG finding sounds extraordinary, but it needs careful translation. An EEG measures electrical patterns at the scalp. Certain rhythms are associated with mental processing and states of consciousness. Finding organized activity during CPR suggests that the brain does not always shut down in a simple, instant sequence. But a pattern associated with consciousness is not a recording of someone's private experience. It is certainly not a photograph of a soul. A smoke alarm can suggest there is a fire. It cannot tell you what the fire is thinking. Scientists have also recorded bursts of organized brain activity near the end of life. In a 2023 study of 4 comatose patients taken off life support, 2 showed increases in fast gamma activity and connectivity in brain regions associated with conscious processing. The patients did not survive, so researchers could not ask whether they experienced anything. The sample was tiny, and the activity could reflect disinhibition, stress, or other features of a failing brain. Another report described coordinated brain rhythms in a single patient whose brain happened to be monitored when cardiac arrest occurred. Again, this suggested that the dying brain may remain organized for longer than the old image of an instant electrical blackout. It did not show consciousness floating away. This is the central distinction. Brain activity near death is evidence of brain activity near death. A memory reported after resuscitation is evidence that a person remembers an experience. Neither automatically demonstrates consciousness after irreversible death. That does not make near-death experiences fake. The experience can be sincere, vivid, emotionally overwhelming, and life-changing, even if its cause is biological. People commonly describe intense peace, bright light, unusual clarity, deceased relatives, a life review, or the sensation of leaving the body. Researchers have proposed several contributing mechanisms, including reduced oxygen, changes in carbon dioxide, stress chemistry, dreamlike REM processes, altered activity in memory systems, and disruption to the brain's model of where the body is located. That last one is especially strange. Your sense of being located behind your eyes feels obvious, but it is a construction. The brain combines vision, touch, balance, and signals from the body to create a stable point of view. Disturb that integration, particularly around the temporoparietal region, and people can experience a distorted body position, or a viewpoint that seems to exist outside the body. No single mechanism neatly explains every near-death report. Different crises may produce similar experiences through different routes. Memories are also collected afterward, when the brain is recovering and trying to turn fragments into a coherent event. Human memory is not security footage. It is closer to an enthusiastic editor. It preserves important material, fills gaps, rearranges timing, and occasionally adds a transition nobody remembers approving. There is also an older reason the soul question feels so natural to us. Humans have treated dead bodies as if the person still matters for an astonishingly long time. Archaeological evidence shows deliberate burials with symbolic objects by around 100,000 years ago. At Sungir in Russia, 2 children buried roughly 24,000 years ago were covered with red ochre and accompanied by carved objects, mammoth tusks, and thousands of ivory beads. These practices may suggest that communities believed identity somehow extended beyond death, although archaeology cannot tell us exactly what they believed. This makes psychological sense. Other people do not exist in our minds as bodies alone. We carry models of them. Their voice, habits, opinions, and likely reactions become part of our own mental world. When someone dies, their body is absent. But that internal person does not instantly disappear. You can still know what joke they would make. You may dream about them or briefly expect them to enter a familiar room. The social brain continues running a relationship after reality has ended it. That does not prove an afterlife. It helps explain why the idea of a separable identity feels intuitive across so many societies. A body can be gone while the person remains psychologically present. And this brings us to the boundary between science and philosophy. Science works by testing observable consequences. If a soul can collect hidden information, move matter, preserve memories without a functioning brain, or communicate after death, those claims could potentially be tested. But if the soul is defined as non-physical, invisible, undetectable, and unable to produce any measurable effect, then it sits outside laboratory testing by definition. Science cannot confirm it, but science may also be unable to rule it out. That is not scientific evidence for a soul. It is a limit on what the method can address. Belief can draw on personal experience, religion, philosophy, or faith. Science asks a narrower question. What can we observe, measure, repeat, and use to distinguish one explanation from another? So, scientists have not finally proven the soul exists. What they have shown is more subtle, and in its own way, more unsettling. The line between awareness and unconsciousness may be less tidy than we assumed. The brain can produce organized activity under extreme conditions. Some survivors return with profound experiences that medicine should study seriously rather than dismiss. Yet none of this demonstrates a mind surviving irreversible brain death. The glowing figure in the thumbnail is still an artistic addition. But our urge to click on it is real. For tens of thousands of years, humans have buried the dead, preserved their stories, dreamed about their return, and wondered whether a person is more than the body we can see. Science has not closed that question. It has simply taught us to be more precise about where the evidence ends and where our oldest hope begins. What should we investigate next? Leave your question or topic suggestion in the comments.